My, do things get exciting in a hurry. So everyone has an opinion on Ukraine-Russia conflict. I'm no different. I have an opinion. What do they say? Opinions are like armpits. Everybody has a couple and they usually stink. And mine probably does too. But to take just the mainstream media narrative of how everybody wants democracy now, it doesn't matter which party they're in, they want democracy and we've got to defend democracy. What a sham that is. Were we worried about democracy in Canada this last few weeks, where the dictator took over and squelched the little people? You know, no big deal. And we've had so many unconstitutional events take place in this country. You know, where's the demand, you know, for justice and you know, it's just ironic. But here's my thoughts on Russia, Ukraine. I think Vladimir Putin is doing exactly what he thinks is best for his country. I'm not going to say that I support him or anything like that, but when you have Ukraine being courted by NATO, and NATO's an enemy to Russia, you know, what's going to happen? What's going to happen here? And I know my comments are going to sound like I'm just, you know, pro-Russia. But the way I'm looking at it is I'm trying to think of why Putin would do this. And so that's where I'm coming from. He's protecting Russia and perhaps trying to reestablish where Russia once was, or the USSR. Back in the US, back in the US, back in the USSR. So just to listen to the stuff, you know, the drum beats that go on, I don't really think is beneficial to see the overall thing, and to think that Ukraine is just these, you know, the government is just honest and they're victims here. You know, give me a break. There are so many U.S. politicians and probably politicians throughout the world that have accumulated millions of their family fortune through crooked deals through Ukraine. The Hunter Biden, so the Biden family, you know, they've made their money through Ukraine. There's great evidence that the Clintons made money. Nancy Pelosi's family, her son, made money. The Saint, I've got to be careful of what I say here, but Mitt Romney, Mittens, his son, that family has made money in Ukraine. It's just odd. Why Ukraine? So there's a lot of interesting things going on. Now, I know the church has a great presence there. We have a temple there. And all of that is threatened. I mentioned this probably a week or two ago, that I'd read and studied somewhere that one of the objectives of Putin is to reestablish the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine. And I never got much of a rise out of that, but I heard Amir say it today. And I'm not saying I'm ahead of Amir in all this, but I did say this on a video a week or two ago, that's another thing. And so where does that put other Christian denominations within the Ukraine if they're not Russian Orthodox? I'd say it could be pretty intense. And my guess is our brethren now are being very careful. And I doubt you'll hear anything about like picking a side here. That's just, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. The idea, though, about keeping track of all this, as far as biblical prophecy, is to see how it affects Israel. And here's one thought I had. This is probably way out there, but in recent years, Israel has discovered huge natural gas resources in the country of Israel. And they're developing that and able to export and do. And it's amazing because they've never been known to have any of these natural resources. But they are now. And it's just so fascinating because Russia is a big supplier for all of Europe, Germany, just for these natural resources. And now that everyone is we're going to do sanctions against Russia. Well, Russia all they need to do is just cut the resources off. But if Israel can step in and provide those resources to many of the countries, think how that would tick Russia off and go, well, we got to squelch Israel from providing this because it's our only leverage. It's just a thought I had. And of course, we know Russia and Iran have an alliance. Iran hates Israel, hates the U.S. It's a complicated thing. And I could see how this could be a World War III very easy because it's a mindset. It's a mindset of now China is like, well, you know what? Maybe now's a good time to take Taiwan and get it under our control. And you can see how these things can blossom. So the effect immediately on the United States is the stock market, fuel prices, things like that. It's just so interesting that just a little over a year ago, we as a country were not only energy independent, oil and gas, but we were exporting. And now that's gone. A year later, that's gone. And we are actually exporting, or we were, oil from Russia. And that's taken off the table now, I'm sure. So, yeah, crazy times. My idea is and I guess a suggestion, and I'm nobody to be suggesting anything to you folks, but man, I can't help myself, but so I have to suggest just listening to the regular news, Fox, ABC, NBC, CBS, and MSLSD, and all of the others. Just listening to those, just blah 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 blah. I think we have to be careful. And I mentioned this the other day too, that Ukraine has really a nasty history in the not so distant past concerning the Jews and killing approximately 1.5 million of their own people, aligning themselves with the Nazis during World War II. Yeah, and Russia actually fighting against that. I know it sounds like a long time ago, but it was 10, 15 years before I was born. I know I'm old and I look old, and I am old, but in a historical sense, it was the other day. It was literally the other day. So all of a sudden the way the news is these poor Ukrainian and the government and the people, they're just so innocent. And we have to establish a democracy. I've heard that word democracy so many times, I'm about ready to throw up from people who could care less about a democracy. Anyway, okay. So that's it about that. Another thing on Jerusalem, some of you probably saw this. I saw it a few days ago and forgot to mention it in the last video, but this huge spring of water discovered under the city of Jerusalem. I think it was one of their government buildings. Just this huge water source. You know, it's just all these things just keep happening, and because water is just everything. It's so critical, and I'm so thrilled that Israel has opened back up again for tourism. Whether you're vaxxed or unvaxxed, you can go. And so I'm already checking on flights and Airbnbs and things like that. Hopefully going to get away here maybe next month. I'm hoping. We'll see how things go. So tours are great. The first time you go, I think it's probably recommended, and there's always smart people, that you can hire and stuff. But now that I've been there a couple of times, and the last time I went, we were just on our own. Man, you can move about so much faster, and you can go here and go there and do this and do that when you're in a big group, and it's awesome. And I'm not saying it's not the way to go, but man, a little tour book, and hire somebody right there on the spot. I mean, some of their cab drivers that we would just consider a guy that doesn't talk, they're actually tour guides, and they'll take you and spend the whole day with you and get you in. Many of them are, the one we had last time he had both Jordanian and Israeli citizenship. He was Palestinian, I guess you could say, but I would say he was more Jordanian, Muslim, and he got us in everywhere. He's just a good man and very knowledgeable about a lot of things. But there's so many sources of books and that you can order and really move about pretty openly and free. But the first time is probably good to take a tour. I don't know. That's just a suggestion. But I think I'd rather, at least in Israel, rather go on my own. And I know you can hire somebody in Jerusalem, and it's a full day, early in the morning till late at night. But cross over into Jordan, go to Petra, and then come back and have just a day excursion. You hire somebody. I would recommend that. Just crossing the border into Jordan and then particularly back into Israel. It's good to have somebody, I think, to kind of help you out. But I don't know. I'm just taking a look at it. So there's some possibilities that this Ukraine-Russia conflict could end up having an effect on Israel. We'll see. That's more what I'm looking at. And of course, you're going to see the prices of everything, because once you affect transportation, which is, basically diesel fuel for the most part, trains, trucks, and even ships to that, it's diesel fuel is the big driver of that. So we'll see what happens. Okay, so I just went through Jacob 5 again for the umpteenth time, and there's just so many interesting things in Jacob 5. If you go to the chapter before that, it kind of sets it up. It really sets it up. Verse 14 in chapter 4. But behold, the Jews were a stiff-necked people, and they despised the words of plainness and killed the prophets, and sought for things that they could not understand. Wherefore, because of their blindness, which blindness came by looking beyond the mark is Jesus, they must needs fall. For God hath taken away his plainness from them, and delivered unto them many things which they cannot understand, because that's what they desired. They desired it. I love that. They got what they wanted. And that's the same with us. We get what we want. It's so true. And because they desired it, God hath done it. And that they may stumble. And now I, Jacob, am led on by the Spirit unto prophesying, for I perceive by the workings of the Spirit which is in me, that by the stumbling of the Jews, they will reject the stone, this Christ again, upon which might be built and have safe foundation. But behold, according to the scriptures, this stone shall be the great and the last, and the only sure foundation upon which the Jews can build. You see, Jews. Jacob is setting us up as to what the allegory of the olive tree and all this. It's all about Israel, and in this sense, Israel are the Jews. Okay, so this is another example of how lumping Israel, Jerusalem, the people there, as Israel or the Jews, and so then we get to this amazing allegory of the olive tree. Now we have it starts off with the Tame olive tree. And it says, we will liken it to the house of Israel, the house of Israel. So, as I said in my last video, there's an argument to say that we could just say Jews, which includes that today. But the whole house of Israel, okay? And that's the Tame olive tree. And why is it tame? And why is it so critical? It's because of what we're studying, and what we have been studying the last few weeks is that Abrahamic covenant, or Abram covenant, because the covenant actually began when his name was Abram, but and then that lineage, that line of where that covenant came through, because it had to come through Israel or Jacob. This is what we're talking about. So this is a confirmation. Jacob chapter 5 is a confirmation that covenant came through Abraham. It actually came through Adam, right? But what we've been discussing recently, Abraham, and then through Isaac, through these really cool stories that we just scratch our head and go, what the heck? Their family's just like ours. They're all screwed up. But there's a purpose and there's a reason for it. And all these bizarre things happen. And that covenant continues. And then it comes to Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. And then we have the 12 tribes, right? Okay. Now, there's several words that are so key to this chapter. I would say preserve is a huge key word. The word preserve. It's in there many, many times. Another word, or it's actually two words, but they're used together, is lay up. Lay up. Corrupted. Grafted. These are very key words. Then we have nouns, I guess, person, place, or things. We have individual trees or branches that have to be identified. So we have the Tame olive tree, house of Israel, says that right off the bat. Then we have wild olive trees and branches, okay? And we have natural branches, okay? And trees. So this is just my opinion, and I've changed my opinion a lot on Jacob 5. Not on everything, but just as I study it more. So I could be totally off on this, and I'm sure there's some good folks out there that will say I'm totally up in the night. But that the house of Israel is the Tame olive tree. That I think we all have to agree on that, because it just spells it out. The wild olive trees and branches are Gentiles, Gentile nations, Gentile individuals. And then the natural branches are originate from the Tame olive tree. So they're scattered Israel, if you will. They're scattered, but they're natural. They have the blood of Israel in them. I think those are the three groups. And as this original house of Israel, Tame olive tree becomes old and corrupted, the Lord of the vineyard, Christ. Here's another interesting thing of Jacob 5. I remember reading in one of the student manuals how they said that the Lord of the vineyards are the prophets. And we can get into that later, because it kind of suggests that a little bit when the Lord of the vineyard is saying, hey, we need to do this, and can you spare it a little bit longer? Oh, then that must be the prophet. The Lord of the vineyard is the Lord. It's the Savior, in my opinion. It's not the prophet. The servants are prophets, and those that work under the prophet's keys, they're the servants. That's just my opinion. So anyway, the servants are working in the vineyard, and the vineyard's the world. And you have the furthest out, and this and that, and you're planting and you're doing this, but you have the original Tame olive tree, which is where the covenant came through Israel, the house of Israel, or the house of Jacob. And so as these different entities are grafted, whether it's a Tame, whether it's the wild olive tree, the Gentile, which came about at the time of Christ, right after Christ, when he told and commissioned his apostles to go ye into all the world. And Peter had that great up on a roof vision of the gospel for everyone. And of course, Paul was huge in spreading the gospel to what we would consider Gentile nations and Gentile individuals. And then you have these natural branches. And these are branches that came off the Tame olive tree, and that the Lord of the vineyard dispersed throughout the vineyard. Nephites, Lamanites, Mulekites, Jaredites, which preceded, Abraham, but all still part of the covenant. That's why because Noah made the same covenant and was promised the same thing. Adam made the covenant, promised the same thing, along with Eve, of course. And all these women, the wives of all these, promised the same thing and were given the same blessing. You'll have hundreds of millions or thousands of millions or something like that. Anyway, it's pretty cool how this happens. So at the end of Jacob 5, we hear another interesting phrase that's very key, and it's one last time, or for the last time, over and over and over again. And it's my belief that we have been in that last time since the restoration, since Joseph Smith, since the first vision, and particularly since the Book of Mormon came forth and the establishment of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This is the one last time. Get some servants. Let's make a big push here before before crap hits the fan. I don't think I see that in the scriptures, crap hits the fan, but I know it's in there somewhere. But this is leading up to something. We've been told by our prophet that, everything prophesied, we have front row seats. That's what President Nelson said. We have front row seats for all these events. We're in it. We live it. Troy Abel says, this is the last dispensation and you're in it. I love that when he does that, because we are. And this is the last time. This is the hastening. President Monson said, it's time to hasten the work. So we get all that. Now, let's talk about preserve versus lay up, and of course corrupted, that's pretty easy. False doctrine, false gospel enters in, and then the tree, the fruit. Oh, we have the fruit of the tree too. I forgot about that. That's the key. That's us. We're the fruit. So let's go to lay up first, because lay up is the harvest. It's taking, plucking, pruning, taking the fruit and laying it up. Now, that's, in my opinion, and as I read this, I used to think lay up and preserve were the same, but I think they're different. I think lay up is basically a good piece of fruit that's worth laying up and harvesting, but it hasn't been preserved yet. I would compare that to a gateway ordinance, the gateway ordinance of baptism. So you are, you're good. You're not bitter. The Lord wants that fruit. The Lord of the vineyard wants that fruit. And so he harvests the fruit or lays it up. But the preserving hasn't taken place yet. The preserving is the sealing. It's the bookend ordinance. And isn't it interesting that baptism, the gateway ordinance, the laying up, in my opinion, is in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. And then the bookend, the sealing ordinance, is in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. I just think that is so complete. And the preservation is the sealing. And we've talked about this before a few times, but when you preserve, in the cur jars or the ball jars, the fruit or vegetables, whatever you're going to preserve, the salsa, which is my favorite, you raise that temperature up, and first you boil out all the impurities from the lids, the rings, and the bottles themselves. You get all the impurities out, you boil it out, you put your whatever you want to preserve in there, and then you put that lid with a rubber seal, and you screw on the ring, and then you heat it up again, and that lid goes boop and seals or preserves that fruit. And the sealing, that's why, in my opinion, it's called the sealing. It's not just this stamp, this wax stamp, or some other kind of stamp. It's preserving or sealing that fruit. So the laying up, the sealing hasn't taken place yet, in my opinion, as I read Jacob 5. But preserving fruit unto the Lord of the vineyard, that's the whole key of everything, is preserving that fruit. And you preserve the fruit through the ordinances. In my opinion, that's what Jacob 5 is all about. And the ordinance come through the Abrahamic covenant. They come through that original Tame olive tree. And then we get at the end where it says, so, okay, this last time we're going to do it, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. No, I think it's just the opposite. It says, where does it say it? Okay. I'm sorry. Well, anyway, I can't, it's towards the end here, and it's just not popping up for me. But the first, meaning the house of Israel, shall be last, and the last, the Gentiles, shall be first. And that's what we see in the last days. So I'm sorry that I can't find that right now, but it's here. I have so much marked in Jacob 5 that I can't hardly even read it anymore. But verse 76, second to the last verse, is really the beginning of the millennial reign, in my opinion. It says, "For behold, for a long time will I lay up the fruit of my vineyard unto mine own self against the season, when speedily cometh. And for the last time have I nourished my vineyard." So the nourishing is continuing. The laying up is continuing during the millennial. And then everything is burned. So you have, in my opinion, two burnings. And it talks about the burnings. So when Christ comes, there's a burning. But then you have the millennial reign. And then you have the real burning. The whole earth is changed. And speaking of that, I attended a funeral of a friend yesterday. Funeral for a friend, or a funeral of a friend, or for a friend. Wasn't that a Elton John song, "Funeral for a Friend"? It was like an organ solo. It was pretty cool. Anyway, a really good friend passed away. Funeral yesterday. And as I was driving home from that, I got thinking, I've preached a lot about how the earth and we as individuals have the same past and the same current time and the same future, in that the earth was created spiritually and then physically, baptized physically, and then cleansed spiritually, and that's our purpose, and that's our destiny, and our history, our past, created spiritually, physically, baptized physically, and then baptized spiritually by fire. And so I'm thinking, well, this friend of mine, he was in his early 80s. He went way too soon. He was just in good shape and everything, but stroke took him. But I thought, well, maybe the earth's just getting old. And a lot of these prophecies concerning the earth, particularly in Revelation, where a third of this will die and a third of that will die and all that, it's kind of like us. Every day we're just dying slowly. Our bodies are not regenerating. I mean, that's when you get our age. So you have this from zero on up, and then you hit a certain age, and I won't identify what that age is, in your 20s maybe, 30s, I don't know. But then at some point, cells and hair and stuff just doesn't rejuvenate like it does, and you just slowly start to look like this. And I'm thinking, gosh, I wonder if that's the prophecy that we're hearing about. Not only a reaction to sin, but when you think about it, our bodies are decaying as a result of sin in a lot of ways. Not that we're, like evil, but we are sinners, all of us, and fall short of the glory of God. We're all susceptible to other sins of people that create an effect on our bodies, right? So it really is sin. We've fallen from the presence of the Lord, and now we're subject to it. Now, Adam and, through Noah, they lived 800-900 years plus, right? And so the effects of a young earth, you were just like, hey, I'm going to have kids until I'm 900 years old. Because the earth was youthful and sin hadn't corrupted it as much, although it was very corrupt, but the overall effect hadn't developed yet. And then as the earth ages, and the effects of accumulated sin, it has an effect on not only us, but the earth. And so the earth is getting old and tired, ready for a renewal. And I know this isn't earth-shattering or anything, but it just made me think, it doesn't seem like, I've been an outdoors guy for forever. And I'm just not seeing the animals I used to see. Not nearly as much. Now you could say, well, there are more people and there are more of this and more of that. Not necessarily. Certainly in the West and particularly in the inner mountain West, winter range for big game animals is crucial, and a lot of land has been taken, by us to live where normally the animals would be wintering, and now there's a development there kind of thing. So I understand that aspect of it, but there's still a lot. We have in Utah, I think it's 70+% of public land. That's a lot of land for animals to live and survive. And hunting has actually gone way downhill. So you can't really, the amount of hunters, you can't really blame it on that aspect of it. It just doesn't seem like there's the regeneration that occurs as much, and I'm talking local here. I get that. And I know other areas are more prolific than others. I get that. But I'm talking overall. It seems like the earth is going through what I'm going through. It's not regenerating as fast as it used to. It's like the Toby Keith song. I'm not as good as I once was, but I'm as good once as I ever was. maybe that holds true for me, but maybe it's the earth too. Maybe the earth's going, I can still do stuff. It's not as good as I used to. So I got thinking about that. I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm sure you'll express that. So there's some ideas for today. This is just an exciting time. I'm praying for all the folks in Ukraine, Russia. I always pray for Israel. I pray for my family. I pray for our ward, people I know of, many of you that have shared some of your struggles and trials. And I just, put my faith in our Heavenly Father and His Son, Jesus Christ, and know that ultimately they win the war and they win everything. And Christ has really already won the battle. He conquered death and victory, and He's wiping away the tears off all faces. And that's for real. And that's where I hang my hat. And at the end of the day, I can close my eyes and be grateful for that, knowing that there are all these other things going on, but ultimately we know who wins this. I love you all, and I know that God loves you, and I know He loves me, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.